Our hero is in prison, not because he did wrong, but because he did right. Here's the single most important fact about Genesis chapter 40. At the beginning, Joseph is in prison. At the end, he is in prison. That's not fair, but there it is. In this series on the life of Joseph, we're looking at 9 critical questions. So far, we have considered 2 questions. Do you know why you were born? Do you know who you are? Here is today's question. Are you willing to wait for God? In this chapter, Joseph is waiting because there's nothing else he can do. He can't get out of prison. He can't appeal his sentence, and he certainly can't escape. He's stuck in an Egyptian prison, far from home, where they think he's dead anyway. He has been falsely accused of rape by Potiphar's wife. You don't have too many friends in that situation. So he waits. At this point, readers of the story face a problem. Because we know how Joseph's life ends up, it's very easy for us to read Joseph's story in light of how it ends. We know that eventually he emerges triumphant, that he will one day say to the brothers who betrayed him, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Our problem is we read this whole story as if Joseph himself knew how it was going to end. That's not true. When Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, he had no idea what was going to happen next. He knew as much about his future as you do about yours. It's not as if God whispered, "Hang tough, kid, don't let them get you down, because pretty soon you're going to be the prime minister of Egypt." It didn't happen that way. This isn't a fairy tale. When Joseph is stuck in prison, he has no inside knowledge regarding how or when or if he'll ever get out. He certainly knows nothing of the baker and the cupbearer. So let's read Genesis 40 as Joseph would have lived it, with no hint of what the future might hold. Here's a short summary of this chapter. In jail, 2 men, 2 dreams, 2 interpretations. One lives, one dies, one man forgets in jail. That's the whole chapter right there. Meanwhile, Joseph waits to see what will happen next. Waiting is perhaps the hardest discipline of the Christian life. Most of us hate to wait. I know I do. Probably all of us are waiting for something at this very moment. Waiting for your grades, waiting to graduate, waiting to be accepted to college, waiting for your first job offer, waiting to see if the bank will give you a loan, waiting for the right time to start a family, waiting for a church to call you, waiting for your loved ones to come to Christ, waiting to meet the right guy or the right girl, waiting to be married, waiting to find out what God wants you to do, waiting for someone to buy your house, waiting for your prayers to be answered, waiting for your husband to come home from a business trip, waiting for your oldest daughter to come back to the Lord. We all have to wait, whether we like it or not. And truth be told, most of life is waiting. For instance, when you watch a football game on TV, most of the time, nothing happens. By rule, the actual game takes 60 minutes to play, but the average NFL telecast lasts 3 hours. According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, in the average NFL telecast, the actual playing of football takes up 11 minutes. If that's true, then what happens to the rest of the time? In that 3-hour block of time, you have 60 minutes for commercials, 75 minutes when the players are standing around, 17 minutes for replays. After a few other miscellaneous things are thrown in, such as crowd shots and talking heads in the booth and shots of the cheerleaders, what you are left is 11 minutes of actual football. I take it as a parable of life itself. The action of life is small. The waiting is large. Warren Wiersbe says this about Joseph's time in prison. God permitted Joseph to be treated unjustly and put in prison to help build his character and prepare him for the task that lay ahead. The prison would be a school where Joseph would learn to wait on the Lord. he would learn that God's delays are not God's denials. We will all spend a lot of time waiting for something to happen. The question then becomes, what do you do while you wait? I find 3 answers from Joseph's prison time in Genesis 40. Number 1, be faithful. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. That's verses 1 through 4. We don't know how long Joseph had been in prison when the cupbearer and baker arrived. It must have been more than a day or 2. Perhaps he had been in prison for a few months when suddenly these 2 new inmates showed up. In thinking about this story, it's vital that we view it from Joseph's perspective. As far as he is concerned, this is just another day in prison. Even though he may be the leader of the prisoners, he is still imprisoned with no hope of getting out. He could not see into the future. The cupbearer would eventually be his ticket out, but he had no way to know any of that at the time. And it wouldn't come to pass for 2 or more years. What do you do when you're unjustly accused? What do you do when people you trusted turn against you? What do you do when your dreams turn to ashes? Even though all those things were true for Joseph, he remains faithful to God and to his duties. Somewhere I read this quote: "The secret of your future is found in your daily routine." The things you do every day, especially the little things that make up your routine of life, those are the seeds of your future that you sow every day. Reminds me of what the preacher said in Ecclesiastes 9 and 10. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. Eugene Peterson, author of the Message Bible, offers a punchier version of this phrase. Whatever turns up, grab it and do it. I like that because it emphasizes the unpredictable nature of life. No matter how well you planned your day, something unexpected is always bound to turn up. And when it does, grab it and do it. This verse challenges us to take hold of the ordinary responsibilities of life and make sure that they get done. It's easy for us to live in the never, never land of what we plan to do tomorrow. We dream about starting a diet or getting a new job or buying a new computer or meeting someone who will sweep us off our feet or somehow finishing that term paper or painting the living room or learning Spanish or calling a new client or applying for a grant or going back to college or any of 1,000 other worthwhile ideas. Meanwhile, there's work to be done. Much of it is tedious, that somehow gets left undone while we are dreaming about what we're going to do someday. Unfortunately, someday never comes for most people. In one of her books, Elizabeth Elliot talks about what to do when you hit a wall and feel stuck. When that happens, she advises people to just get up and do the next thing because there is always a next thing that needs to be done. That's good advice. It may be small or trivial, but there's always something that needs to be done. Washing or cleaning, writing a note, making a phone call, paying bills, cleaning the shelves, filling an order, putting gas in the car, picking up the kids, taking your pills, saying your prayers, weeding the flowers, feeding the dog. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way: whatever your life's work is, do it well. A man should do his job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn could do it no better. If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures, like Shakespeare wrote poetry, like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, "Here lived the great street sweeper who swept his job well." Think of it this way: because God's hand was upon him, Joseph was promoted by the captain of the prison to be in charge of all the other prisoners. Because he was faithful, He did not shirk his duty when these two men entered the prison. Little did he know that by taking care of them, he was advancing the cause of his own freedom. Let me sharpen that point a bit. I said little did he know, but really I should have said it was impossible for him to know. Faithfulness is his own reward. So here's a question for all of us. Will we be faithful where we are even at a point in life where life seems to make no sense? Number two, be ready. And one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in a prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." That's verses 5-8. There are dreams all through Joseph's story. First, he has them in chapter 37. Then these two men have them in chapter 40. Then Pharaoh will have a two-part dream in chapter 41. In each case, the dreams prove crucial in Joseph's life. In Genesis 37, Joseph has dreams that he shares with his brothers, provoking their hatred even more. But in Genesis 40, the baker and the cupbearer turn to Joseph to help them interpret their dreams. Joseph's willingness to interpret their dreams means that he has not yet given up on his own dreams. Even though many years have passed and he has endured the pain of rejection, enslavement, false accusation, and imprisonment, down deep inside, he still believes that one day God will someday cause those early dreams to come true. Otherwise, he would have said to the men, "My advice is forget about those dreams. They don't mean anything. I had dreams of my own once, and look where I am now." But he didn't say that. And he doesn't say, "Don't worry, fellows. I'm an expert in dreams. I can figure this out for you." Rather than giving in to despair or relying on false optimism, he points the men to God. Do not interpretations belong to God? His answer means something like this. There's a God in heaven who gives dreams to men. He and he alone can explain the dreams you had. I don't have the answer, but I know the Lord, and he can help you out. Joseph stood out among his own generation because he saw God's hand everywhere. He had a big God, and therefore he knew that being in prison was no hindrance to the Almighty. Did you know that God does some of his best work in prison? John Bunyan goes to prison and comes out with Pilgrim's Progress. Dietrich Bonhoeffer goes to prison and out comes the cost of discipleship. Martin Luther King goes to jail and out comes letters from a Birmingham jail. We serve a God who is not stopped by barbed wire and high walls. Prison doors can never keep him out. Joseph's example leads me to ask this question. Are you ready to serve God right where you are, even though you'd rather be somewhere else? Number three, be bold. When you read Genesis 40, you discover that Joseph tells the cupbearer that he will be released in 3 days and restored to his former position. No doubt, he was delighted to hear the news. Then Joseph adds a personal request in verse 14. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. While preparing this message, I ran across a Bible teacher who calls this a lack of faith on Joseph's part. I don't agree with that at all. If Joseph has been unfairly treated and he's not guilty, then why shouldn't he seek his release? When I preached this once, I told the audience that if I were in prison and if a buddy of mine were about to get out, I would look to heaven and say, "Your will be done," and then turn to my buddy and say, "Help me get out of here." They laughed at me because we all understand that if you're in prison, you want to get out as soon as you can. And in Joseph's case, he truly hadn't done anything wrong. On one hand, he is faithful and ready to serve God where he is. On the other hand, he doesn't want to stay in prison forever. It's as if he's saying, I'm here, but this is not my whole life. I accept where I am for the moment, but I hope to be set free eventually. 2 years later, his request will lead to his release. I don't think he ever regretted what he said. The whole episode reminds me of a scene from the movie Shawshank Redemption, when Andy Dufresne, who was falsely accused of murdering his wife and her lover, was talking with his friend Red in the prison yard. They were discussing Andy's hope of getting out someday when Red says, basically, you got to give that up. Look at us. We'll never get out of here. Andy pauses for a moment and then says, it comes down to a simple choice. Get busy living or get busy dying. So many people lose hope. And when hope is gone, life is over. During my early years at MD Anderson, Kathy Cates served as my administrator, and when I met her, she'd already been in that position for over 25 years. And although she was in her early 70s, she stayed on for a few more years to help us out. And she had a saying that she often repeated to me: don't forget to have a blast while you last. I always thought that little saying summed up an enormous spiritual truth. Since we won't be here forever, we might as well have a blast while we last. Folk singer Joan Baez put it this way: you don't get to choose how you're going to die or when. You only get to choose how you're going to live now. What will you do with the dash? Go to a cemetery and look at any gravestone, and underneath the name, you will see something like this: 1933 to 2007. A date of birth, a date of death, and a dash to represent everything in between. That's all this life really is, the short little dash between the time we show up and the time we depart. Either that thought makes us depressed or it inspires us to action. Perhaps you would put the question this way: what are you going to do with the dash? How will you fill the dash that will someday mark your gravestone? A few months ago, I celebrated my 50th birthday. That fact in itself is not notable, but it's good to use your birthday as a means of taking stock of where you are in life. A man turns 50, he becomes a philosopher of sorts. They say that 50 is the new 40, which may be true, but it's definitely not the new 30. And when you turn 50, you can't kid yourself about where you are on your journey. I'm definitely closer to the end than to the beginning. A friend sent me a note that said, birthdays are good for your health. The more you have, the longer you live. That cheered me up. That same friend passed away from cancer a month shy of his own 50th birthday. During that period, God spoke to me again, by which I mean he impressed a great truth on my heart. I felt as if God were saying, this cancer is a wake-up call. It's a reminder that you and Arlene won't be here forever. You're going to die someday. Don't be fools into thinking otherwise. So if there's anything else you want to do for me and my kingdom, go and do it now. Don't wait, because you're not going to be here forever. Now, I can't prove that to anyone else, but it was all very real to me. As I've said, I didn't hear a voice or have a vision, just a profound sense of God speaking through the circumstances of life to get my attention. The fact of our coming death can make us timid, or it can make us bold. Go and do now. Get busy living or get busy dying. Joseph didn't settle. Joseph said to the cupbearer, remember me. It makes perfect sense. Joseph didn't settle. He was faithful in prison. He was ready in prison. He was bold in prison. What do you do while you wait? Be faithful, be ready, and be bold. Verse 23 gives us the end of the story. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Man, that's sad. After all that, the cupbearer forgets Joseph. But that happens all the time in this life. we make promises we don't keep. We intend to stay in touch, but we don't. We plan to call an old friend, but we don't. The what ifs of life will kill you. When the cupbearer got out, he promptly left the prison far behind. Joseph must have had many questions. What if the cupbearer never remembers? What if I die in prison? What if I never get to clear my name? The what ifs of life will kill you. What if I lose the job? What if he never asks me out on a second date? What if I never get married? What if we can't have children? What if things don't work out? What if we run out of money? What if my husband makes a bad decision? What if I lose my job? What if our children get sick? What if we can't find a place to live? What if that contract falls through? What if I don't get accepted? What if the chemo doesn't work? What if she files for divorce? What if the church splits? Put yourself in Joseph's place. The only people who can help him think he's dead, or they think he's committed a vile crime, or they've forgotten him completely. What do you do then? It all depends on how big your God is. How big is your God when you've been betrayed, when you've been enslaved, when you've been falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten? Joseph's experience in prison reminds us that God doesn't keep time the way we do. He is from everlasting to everlasting. And with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. Time is no complication to God. A.W. Tozer said it this way: God never hurries. There are no deadlines against that which he must work. He's never in a hurry. He's never late. He's never behind schedule. And even though the cupbearer forgot Joseph, God didn't. What do you do while you wait? Wait on the Lord, because they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Your Redeemer is on the way. He's not just working on your schedule. William Cowper struggled mightily with depression and lived under a cloud most of his life. Out of his suffering came one of our greatest hymns, written in 1774. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessings on your head. Let God be God, and all will be well. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. Blind unbelief is sure to err and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. Let God be God, and all will be well. Let me ask the key question one more time. Are you willing to wait for God? The sermon ends where it began, with Joseph in prison, falsely accused, unjustly imprisoned, alone and forgotten. Apparently he's hit a dead end. The story is over, or so it seems. Stay tuned. He's about to meet the most powerful man in the world. God, thank you today that it's not over till you say it's over. Help us to continue to trust in you where we are. Help us to be faithful where we are, to be faithful while we wait. And help us to always remember that you may not come when we want you to, but you're always on time. And now to him who is able to keep you from falling and present you faultless before his presence with great joy. For only wise God our Savior, the glory and majesty, honor and power, both now and forever. Amen.